record the session. Let's see if I can record the session. So hello, everybody. Happy to have you on board for another episode of Caribbean Rum Chronicles. And I have the usual suspects with me. We're hoping to have the Chef Defour join us in a little while when he figures out the connection. There he is. I've just found him. So there you go. Welcome.
What's happening? What's happening?
Welcome. So I think before we start today's show, I would like to just have a brief moment's silence in respect for George Floyd and the others that have experienced injustices for their situation and where they are that we all have been pretty much against. So just a moment's silence, please. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. So, episode 3 of the Caribbean Rum Chronicles. Today, as you know, we are cooking with rum, if you're not aware. I hope everybody likes their food. It was somewhat of a small challenge to do today's session because I wanted to give you such a variety. I'm surprised at the level of, or the lack of level of information that was readily available. And thank goodness we have a chef on board today who will offer some of his expertise. And I mean, let me just tell you quickly, with the usual suspects, an introduction. We have the Rum Doctor. He may appear on your screen as K Chromatic, but his name is Kelvin.
Yes, sir.
He is a man of many Caribbean islands, and he is very into
a special fried rice.
A special fried rice indeed, and he is very much into macerating and infusing fruits and spices into rum. I will just let you know that I may have to dash to the cooker, but I'm not too far away from it because I am making one of the recipes as we speak.
Lovely.
So I just have to double check on it at the odd occasions, but you guys can keep the crowd entertained. My second guest that I want you to, and he's a regular, not just a guest, he's actually another co-host, is Emmanuel Ferris-Hugh, who claims to know how to make drinks. He is a bar manager of repute. He has been around the block many times. I'm sure I can say that. And his expertise is quite valuable to us. Another man of Caribbean background between Antigua and Jamaica, and spent time in Barbados. And you'll hear me referring to him as Manny. And he actually currently is one of the managers at Lucky Kane, a rum bar in Islington. So there you go. Third, another co-host, which is Lizette Davis, who is the only one that is sitting in beautiful climate because she is in Grenada, and she actually runs a guest house called the Rumboat Retreat. And if you're in Grenada, there's no point staying anywhere else. Rumboat Retreat not only offers fabulous hospitality, beautiful rooms, and there's only 4 rooms unless you've added more recently, Lizette.
No, not yet.
Right, there's 4 rooms, but those 4 rooms are amazing, and in the lounge area of those 4 rooms is a very well-stocked rum bar, and Lizette goes around Grenada teaching people about rum also. So thank you very much for joining us. And Chef Defour, you will hear me refer to him as Hassan. Hassan has very, or chef, whichever. He's a man of Trinidad reputation and born and bred in Trinidad, as he reminded me. He's known as a Caribbean culinary ambassador, and has 2 restaurants that you can visit. One is in Singapore, so get out to Singapore, called the Limehouse, and then one in Oxford called Spice Roots, which is an award-winning restaurant for Caribbean cuisine and best restaurant in Oxford. So he must be doing something right there, or else I don't know if he's paying money to the judges to give him these awards. So I want you to quickly say hi to everybody while I just double check the pot. One is in Singapore, so get out to Singapore called the Limehouse, and then one in Oxford called Spice.
My bad, that was me.
Hello. We got a double feed.
Are you
showing?
That was me. Sorry.
Anyway, I should also say welcome to another guest and hopefully a permanent partner and guest in our broadcast today, which is Zavy. So you can now tune in through zavy.co and watch our live feeds through Zavy. And if you're already a member of Zavy, please, and a regular of Zavy, welcome. We're glad to have you and to share our experiences and our knowledge. But today's Cooking with Rum. We've had, as I said, it's episode 3. The past, we've more or less been talking about how we drink rum in the Caribbean. Today, we're going to talk about how we cook with rum. So it's a bit of a culinary treat today. And rum does have, surprisingly enough, has a steep history with cooking. And even one of the recipes which we're going to talk about today, actually, I put it on the list because technically it is not from the Caribbean, although many people think that Bermuda is in the Caribbean, but it is not a Caribbean island, but it's close enough. So we'll allow them the recipe today. And it is a fish chowder that dates back to the 17th century. So that gives you an idea of how long people have been cooking with rum. And when you do a lot of research, you may find that there's not as many savory recipes as you would like to find, but you will find a lot of dessert recipes, baking recipes, such as cakes, even ice cream. Everybody knows of rum and raisin ice cream. Does anybody remember eating rum and raisin ice cream in the Caribbean? And I want to ask a question. I'm sure it did have real rum in it, didn't it? It's not like the ones we have today.
No, it's the rum was very, very like you could taste the strength of the rum in it. I mean, from my experience then, in growing up in Curacao, so
yeah, I mean,
what they used to do with the raisins is that they would soak them in the rum. So
right,
to add that extra flavor when you bite into the raisins, it would even more flavor, more rum.
Exactly.
And that would technically be illegal in the Western world, wouldn't it? Because obviously, majority of people who eat ice cream are children. So I don't think that you'd have to use some sort of rum flavoring. Would that be right, Chef?
Yes, if you wanted for that underage market, but I think it's something that adults will enjoy. So the kids can have the chocolate chips and that's
right.
Can have
Right. So, and to add to that, I mean, we have seen a number of modern day chefs that have seen the benefits of cooking with rum. I mean, some of the recipes today, you can see this one. This one is a book by Paul Yellin, a Barbados chef called Infusion. And he did some recipes, a number of recipes working with Mount Gay. And I have another one here from Janie. Oh my goodness, can't pronounce her name fully. It's so let me just Janie Colney Johnson, and this was a book called Table Manners. Quite a large book. It's a very much a coffee table book, but this talks about chefs and the recipes in Antigua. That we will discuss a couple of recipes from both of these books a bit later on today. So there are a number of modern day chefs that use rums. And we will not only discuss some of the recipes and show you some of these recipes, but we will also talk about the rums in these recipes and what those rums possibly bring to the table for these recipes as well. And, generally, a lot of references talk about using quite often dark or spiced rums in the flavoring of food. But that doesn't preclude the fact that you also will note that many will use white rums, which are commonly used in fish and seafood and maybe white meat dishes like chicken. People use aged and dark rums with red meats and barbecue and so forth. And the dark and more darker spiced rums give a distinct flavor and a characteristic. So I think, does anybody want to comment on what they think is a preference for those style of rums in cooking?
Well, I think the aged rums have a natural partnership with sweet foods, don't they? So if you're making barbecue sauces or things like that, an aged rum is going to pair really well. But light rums, I guess, if you're cooking something fresher, maybe some can pair with fish, things like that. Of that nature, I mean.
Yeah, because aged rums lend a very caramel notes to dishes.
Right.
The dark rums definitely are an enhancer to the chocolate flavor in chocolate. So if you are making, for example, chocolate mousse or something, you add a little bit of dark rum, it really lifts the flavor of the chocolate that's in it.
Right. Okay. So as we move on and we talk about rums and the first recipe, let's have a look at a couple of appetizers, and both of them are soups. First one is the one I mentioned earlier. This is a recipe, the 17th century recipe. I'm not sure if it's the exact recipe from the 17th century, but I suspect that this probably is the recipe that's been modified by Gosling's Black Seal, which is a rum which is blended in Bermuda. I believe, from what I understand, what Gosling's Black Seal does is that they will buy a number of different rums across the Caribbean, and they'll do the blend themselves. This one here is quite an interesting little recipe, and quite a bit of complexity, because it's quite interesting when we talk, and I'll refer this to Chef Defour. When Europeans look at cooking, and we talk about the French and the Italians, who are very renowned for their culinary skills, they use very little spices. They actually use less spices and always talk about allowing the flavor of the food to develop. Now, in the Caribbean and in the Far East, when we talk about Indian and Chinese and Caribbean cooking, where we inherited a lot of spices from the Far East, we use a lot more spices. This one here in particular has a number of spices. What's the benefit of having a bigger selection of spices?
But the spices it's different layers, within when you're tasting the food. So just as like when you start, you get the salty taste, the sweet notes, and by allowing different, the complexity of the spices, it blends and works with the dishes. Like in Caribbean food, I would say, like, because our food is a lot of is real fusion cookery. So you have from where we have the curry spices, then you have stuff like thyme and and other herbs that make up our cuisine, and it's just that blend.
Right, and but getting the balance of those spices right is very critical, isn't it? Because you don't want to overly spice or have not overly spice, but you obviously don't want to overspice, but you don't want one particular spice dominating. It's about getting balance, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah.
Right.
So I think with the balance, like in the Caribbean islands, you would find where, all right, the balance in Trinidad might be more kind of, there's a lot more Asian influence, and with the curries and those like coriander, shadow benny that we use in the herb, those kind of herbs. When you go to Jamaica, it's the jerk, that pimento, those kind of thyme, and those kind of spices. So with each island, there's a bit of complexity and slight differences in how they use the spices.
And the influences that, as you've mentioned as well, the influences from the past, in terms of, as you've mentioned, with Trinidad, the heavy Asian influence from India, and you go through the other islands in the French Caribbean, you'll have some influences there in terms of a more Creole style and so forth. So those influences exist. And Manny, in terms of you created a number of cocktails in your time. There must be that similarity in trying to create balance between the ingredients you use, just like you're trying to create balance with spices.
Well, yes. I mean, cooking and making drinks are very similar. And what you're trying to do is create textures and flavor pairings that kind of create a synergy, so they work together. So when you make a drink, you kind of create different flavor profiles that work together. And if they all work together in unison, then it creates a a round and enjoyable drink. That's the key.
Right. And in terms of this recipe that we're looking at now, this Bermuda fish chowder, firstly, please somebody tell me what sherry peppers are. Does anybody?
No, I
never heard of a cherry pepper.
I don't know what peppers are.
Somebody Google it, please, and tell us.
The sweet pepper family, sherry pepper in it.
It's a sweet pepper family, and okay, and I've had many a clam chowder in New England and up in the Boston area, and this is obviously not a clam chowder, but a fish chowder. Is there a particular? Does a chowder imply a style of soup? Or is it just another name for soup? Can anybody? I mean, is it just is chowder another name for soup? It's not necessarily a
creamy kind of thick soup in it.
Right. So there is a little bit more creamy texture. And Manny,
there's different types of soup. Like there's broths. There's the chowder has a bit more texture.
Right.
Yeah.
And Manny, in terms of Gosling's Black Seal rum, has very butterscotch, vanilla, heavy caramel note, and it's quite robust.
It's interesting that they would pair that with fish, actually, because it's very robust. It's going to impart lots of flavor. It's got a very identifiable flavor profile, you know.
Right.
Can I just say something?
Well, obviously, I'm coming. I need you to say something.
Thank you. I'm looking, and they're using the fish head. Yeah, and this is a very it's a very deep flavor in the head. It's different from the rest of the body when you're using the head, and with all the spices and the herbs and so, you would see that the Gosling will add some kind of like base to it, you know.
Right.
Because it's not a very fresh soup. If you're looking at it, you know, it's got tomato, all these deep flavors.
Yeah.
So the darker rum would be better than a white rum because it's not. The fish head is a really. I mean, that's why Caribbean people love to make soup with fish head because it has a completely different flavor from the body.
Right. That's a very, very good point in picking up because you notice they put all fillets. So obviously that's the soup, particular Western markets where maybe certain places you go, you're not going to exactly get the whole fish. You can go to the supermarket and pick up fillets much easier. And I think some people as well, I've had experiences where people get a little bit turned off by seeing a fish head in a bowl of in anything. So
yeah, I'm one of them. I chopped the head off, man. I don't put that in my plate.
No, Kelvin. Kelvin, you're too much special fry.
I take it off and I put it aside. You know, I don't chew on the fish head now. It's none of my business.
It's none of your business.
The head, I'm telling you, moving to the Caribbean, and my gran used to use the head in soup, and I never liked to soup.
All right. So it does.
Sorry.
So let's because we have a few recipes today, and let's talk about another soup recipe, and in a comparison here. And now what we have from Chef Irie, who is a Jamaican chef, who is a Jamaican television chef, well, an author, and I think he has also done some TV work. And he makes a pumpkin and coconut rum soup. And I can tell everybody that if you Google Chef Irie pumpkin coconut rum soup, you will see him making it on YouTube. So he, in case you're not sure whether I'm telling you the truth or not, but this is a recipe that he didn't quote the exact recipe, but I kind of watched the video and sort of picked up the sort of ingredients and the quantities he used. And it was quite interesting because on the television, it was a 20-minute serve that he suggested, which to me seems rather short for a soup in order to allow those flavors to develop. Anybody want to comment on that?
You can definitely cook that soup in 20 minutes, you know, because it's pumpkin. It's going to break down in about 10 minutes, and once you put that through the processor with the herbs and stuff, because sometimes you want the herb, you want the freshness of the herb, so you don't want it to be, you know, it doesn't necessarily need to be a long boil.
Right.
You don't want to overcook all those little herbs that's in there, because that will enhance the flavor of the soup. If it's just a pumpkin liquid soup like that, you don't have the meat, you don't have the potato, you don't have the dumpling. You just
so the video is quite fascinating, because when he's got the pot of soup on the fire and he's adding ingredients, and I rate these chefs because certain times he was holding a pot. It's a metal pot, and he was holding it with his bare hand. And I'm sitting there going, boy, that pot must hot.
Chef Irie is actually a very dear friend of mine. And we spent a lot of time in Tortola doing on this whole minority chef summit. I'm not a chef, I went to represent Ron. And as a Jamaican, he is such a colourful character and loves to put rum in food. So that's where he is eccentric in that he would hold a pot with his bare hand.
And just to show you how eccentric he was, when he added the pumpkin and the pumpkin started to stew down, if in that recipe it talks about then you've got to puree it. And you know how he pureed it? He didn't empty the pot. He had this huge hand blender that looked like it belongs in a building site, and he just got this hand blender and put it into the pot and just blended it while it was on the heat. So it was absolutely fabulous. And what I did here notice was, and when we talk about rums in soups, these first two are not rum selections of my own. These are rum selections from the recipes that have been garnished. But he used Bacardi Añejo Dark, right? Wow. And now in the soup, and he put a generous helping of it. I mean, sometimes, quite often Caribbean chefs, I'm sorry to say this to people who like to look at recipes, but on this one you can see sea salt and black pepper. Now, Caribbean chefs will always put that generally to taste. So they don't put exact ingredients of salt and pepper, right? Everything is to taste. So it's about measuring and knowing what is the right amount dependent on the ingredients. So Carta Negra, Manny, I mean, what is that bringing to the table? I mean, Carta Negra's, they don't make Carta Negra anymore, do they?
Well, Carta Negra, I think Carta Negra has went out.
No, sorry, not Carta Negra. Sorry, Añejo Dark, not Carta Negra.
Añejo Dark got discontinued. But right. I reckon it's going to give you like a naked woody notes, because the Bacardi itself hasn't got super like a large amount of flavors in terms of the base rum itself, but then it's going to give you those aged flavors, that oak, the kind of caramel, those kind of natural aged rum flavors, without giving you the cane sugar flavors.
But then he would have put that dark rum in on the last step, right? Because otherwise you just boil up the whole flavor of the rum.
Correct. Okay. Actually, personally, I love a pumpkin soup, and watching this recipe, I think this is, I mean, obviously this is going to have a creamier texture, isn't it, Chef, because of the pumpkin, when you puree the pumpkin. But
pumpkin is a nice smoothness, sweetness, but also coconut and rum works together. Right. You understand? So that sweetness, and then you have the nuttiness of the coconut with those spices. Where there's rum, there's fun. You understand? So a couple of rum in there, that's gonna be a nice soup, you know.
Right, and it's quite interesting because I learned to cook like most of us probably from our mothers, who would dab hands. Generally, that generation of mothers were superb. They spent a lot of time in the kitchen. They were excellent cooks, and you go up on this fabulous array of foods. And one ingredient, one herb that goes in so many dishes more than any other herb, and I'd like to know why, is thyme.
Well, thyme is a herb that we use a lot in Caribbean cookery. There's some, if you watch it sometimes, like Italians and stuff, they use thyme more in lightly, like, or it's in their mixed herbs, in their bolognese and stuff, but we have that as a blend in all of our green seasonings that we would have, or the jerk marinades, or those base seasonings that we use in the Caribbean to make. I there's some, like I have I call it like there's certain things that you would see always in Caribbean cooking and seasoning, you know. One of it is thyme. You see the Scotch bonnet, ginger, garlic, stuff like that will always be there, you know.
Right. So those are the foundations. It was always the case that, you know, so when I was told to season meat, obviously compulsory was salt and pepper. Generally, it's a pungent spice, so it was either garlic, ginger, maybe something like a pimento, which is going to have strong flavors that is going to help it. And then on the herb side, it was generally always thyme. And obviously, I've learned to experiment with other herbs and spices. And, you know, I used to love using tarragon with chicken because I always felt that tarragon and chicken was a great marriage and a great partnership. So that was always something quite interesting. So let's move on. Let's talk chicken. Yeah. And I've got some so these were actually traditional recipes. And this one here taken out of Cuba, which is a recipe that is made. And some of these recipes, don't get me wrong, some of these recipes that are made in... I hope that doesn't come up on the right screen. I hope it doesn't come up, please. Some of these recipes can be made without rum. And you made a very good point, Kelvin, in terms of if you don't want to use rum.
Yeah, I mean, if you're somebody that don't drink alcohol, you know, there's the rum extracts or rum flavoring that you can get. I mean, I know there's a brand called McCorbin's, I think it's called. You can get rum extracts, and it has a very concentrated. It's very concentrated. So if you're using it as you don't want to interrupt the liquid of the actual juices of the foods. So you put the rum extracts in there, and it's pretty good to use in that respect. So.
Right. So talking about the methods here quickly in regards to this recipe. In terms of the marinade, all the ingredients together, and obviously use that marinade in order to coat your chicken pieces. You can toss it, you can rub it with your hands, and then put to season, right? I've been raised to quite often a lot of these recipes. This one in particular said marinade, put it in a fridge and marinate for 2 to 8 hours. My parents always taught me to marinate overnight. What's your take on that, Chef?
With our Caribbean food, the longer the better. You understand? So at least if you can, 24 hours is great. You know that the flavors get inside. We like to taste the flavors going straight through the meat. You know, whereas in some other styles of cooking, you know, it's just on top, or they have, you know, like a little less coating and not much marination.
Well, you said, Roger, I think you said it earlier on. It's one of the foundations that I know of. You know, when you're cooking, you leave it for the next day, or you leave it at least for that length of time to let that meat soak up all those flavors. So if you put the rum in there, that would be amazing next day.
Right, and then Lizette, I mean, you can see the wonderful picture of the picture on the bottom right of how it's done, and you can see quite obviously that what they do is with the flour mixes created after the marination has taken place. They've obviously rolled it in the flour, which is very traditional to cooking, not just in the Caribbean, to give that flour, to give the meat that coating, and then it's fried, and then sort of piece by piece, and it's fried. And the smaller it is, I suppose, is the more the marinade and the flavors are going to impact on the chicken.
Yeah, I mean, anything fried chicken, this is really pretty much the way that it's done. You season the flour, you season the meat, and you fry. And then you even season the oil. You put piece of, I don't know, it's like the standard process. This is very Caribbean, what they're doing here in Cuba. Yeah.
Right, and those I'm missing, but I'm seasoning the pot. So excuse me.
That's all right.
Do your work, Chef.
Don't burn it.
So I think this looks absolutely delicious, and I think what's a garnish? I suppose that's used in the parsley or something, or on a sort of, you see the green garnish at the end there. Obviously, the lime to take away some of that the grease from the fried chicken, and the presentation looks marvelous.
The garnish is fresh parsley.
Yeah. So it's one of those dishes that I looked at and I went, "Yep, I've got to try that." So for definite, it looks quite tasty. Would you serve that as a main or as an appetizer?
I'll say appetizer.
Well, you can serve it both. Okay. As a main with like maybe a nice rice and beans, some plantains at the side, and you have a chicken.
Okay. So
as a some bar bite, with on a skewer.
Yeah, and you have some dips on the side, and you sip on some rum at the same time.
That's the important bit now as well, because it was quite interesting in terms of a couple of the recipes that I was given. One of them actually deliberately mentioned the fact that make sure you've got some of the rum on the side when it's served.
Of course.
So I don't know whether the plan there is that they were either marketing their particular rum or whether they figured that if it doesn't taste good, at least you can get drunk on it. But Manny, I think as well, an aspect of that is as well, and I know in terms of making drinks and cocktails, is people think garnish is for decoration, but actually the garnish, quite often the fragrance from the garnish adds to the flavor of the drink.
Well, a lot of your taste is what you smell, so you kind of have to reintroduce those flavors so that as you're smelling the garnish, it kind of it brings up the level of the flavors that you taste in the food, so it kind of partners,
Right.
So if you add components that are already contained in the drink or in the food, it means you can taste them better within the dish.
Right. So in this recipe, my French, Kelvin, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Poulet boucané.
Yeah, poulet boucané. Yeah.
Boucané, right?
Well pronounced.
Now, the traditional recipe did not call for rum, but I did find one that did call for some rum. So obviously somebody had experimented with the traditional Guadeloupean. I suppose it's served across the French Caribbean, in Martinique as well, and other territories. But here, another one that's highly seasoned. Here we see the call, as you mentioned, for Scotch bonnet. I think my favorite all-time pepper, because I think rather than just heat, it carries so much flavor. And for the first time, probably in all the recipes, we've seen the introduction of some allspice, haven't we? So what do you think, Lizette? What do you think of this recipe?
Yeah, it looks really delicious. I'm looking at it and I'm analyzing it, and it looks really nice.
And cinnamon sticks as well. So allspice, cinnamon quite often normally used in baking. Wouldn't you say that, Chef?
Yes, but those in the jerk marinade, which this has a lot of similar ingredients. There's cinnamon, there's nutmeg. There's a lot of other spices than than thyme and the Scotch bonnet. But I like this recipe is a winner. It definitely would. I think with the rum, it would even add. I would like to try this with like a agricole rum, just to get that even.
Say the same thing.
Well, so my recommended rum for this, I didn't have a recommended rum, and my recommended rum for this was actually HSC Black Sheriff, which
Roger,
is.
How did you know that? You read my mind. You read my mind, bro.
Which is a 3 to 4 year old rum agricole. But it's aged in a heavily charred barrel, so it gives you some really smoky and woody notes to the rum as well. And this recipe is actually is grilled on the charcoal, so it's one of those street type foods that's grilled on the charcoal. And I felt as if something like a Black Sheriff gives you that extra woody and smoky note, and obviously that grassy herbaceous flavors that would really
we'll take that dish into like that will when you bite into that, when you get that's even when it's grilling and you smell it, you will be getting that kind of sugar cane notes coming out. It will work. Definitely.
Yeah,
Right.
That sounds good.
Because the same kind of flavors that rum will give all those cocktails like tikis, like the caramel, the spices, the molasses, as you just said. It will come
And the sugar.
And the sugar, yeah, it will give the foods a completely different dimension when it comes to pan sauteing or pan fried or
Right.
pork and stuff like that. So yeah.
Right. And can you explain quickly, Chef? Because in the Caribbean we use scallion, or as it's pronounced, I suppose, by the English, scallion. But but we use scallion. But is it fair to say that spring onion is the best substitute?
Yes, it's the same family. It's a baby onion, So
Right.
that's basically what is it like? It in Saint Lucia they call tiloyon. So it's like it's basically a small little onion. So
Right.
that's the closest we can get to it in the UK. Like for instance, or you sometimes you might get it at certain independent suppliers, but it works. I use spring onions and it works very similar to
Okay, and I noticed now in my supermarket that spring onion, the varieties are changing as well, because just last week I was in the supermarket and there's a big bulb type spring onion now as well. So rather than just the thin stalked onions as well. So
can I just ask something? Is this all blended together, or is it just put in like? That's the question I wanted to ask actually, because here in Grenada, if you get all those, you would blend it and then you would rub it into the chicken, so it's really, really fine. So it doesn't, if you have chopped bits of side, or as you call it, scallion, and then you put it to grill, it might burn before.
But let me see. There you go. So obviously you rinse the chicken. Quite often I can say to people that it's traditional in the Caribbean to wash meat, but wash meat and fish, but particularly white meats in particularly have to be. So, and you wash it with vinegar and or lime or something that's very acidic, and that really cleans the meat from sort of any nasty unwanted flavors that might come through, and you don't know how it's been handled as well prior to cooking it as well. But here you see that
stirring it.
Yeah, so they've added it into a marinade. They've created a marinade with it, haven't they? And then before it's placed onto the charcoal grill, and they're using sugar cane in the charcoal in the actual grill as well.
I see that now.
Yes.
I'm wondering, is that bagasse or is it just the real sugar cane? I wonder.
I would suspect that it would have to be bagasse. I would have thought the wet sugar cane.
Even, I think you could even use the fresh sugar cane.
Right. Yeah.
In the I've seen that done already, where like in terms of we barbecuing on the fresh sugar cane, just as how they do it on the pimento wood. You understand?
Right.
So you're allowing the smoke to come through that, and it adds flavor.
Nice.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So sorry, I'm just tidying up my browser so that I can make life a little bit easier. So let's finish off with the one recipe that I'm sure would tempt a lot of people in terms of cooking, because it's such a popular method of what people love, and this would make a fabulous appetizer as well, which is wings. And this is now the first use of what is quite common in the Caribbean. We've talked about rum marinade and also a rum glaze, because rum glazes tend to be more for barbecuing. Is that correct?
Yep. 100%.
Barbecuing, like finishing sauce. You can actually use it in sandwiches. You can,
Right. And this one here now we have quite a simple recipe, and I like this one because I thought I'm going to give Manny a chance to. This is a rum and cola marinade, a glaze with rum and cola, which I thought was rum is most commonly drunk in the Caribbean with cola. So why not make a marinade or glaze with it? So
well, cola also reduces down really well because of the sugars. So when you make a reduction, you kind of it pairs well with that tendency. If you're going to glaze something, you want something high in sugar.
Right. Not here we have another example of, for those people who don't want anything overly spiced. So here we're not really fighting with a lot of spices, because in the wings you're really just using some smoked paprika and some chili powder. Salt and pepper we Caribbean people don't call spice because they're mandatory. And obviously there's some red hot sauce in the glaze. So I think what we can comfortably say is that if people can't handle hot red pepper, use a sweet chili sauce instead.
Yeah. No, but with our Caribbean food, I always recommend that you can have the hot condiments, you can have the hot spices at the side where you can add, but you can flavor with the thyme and the ginger and the garlic and the pimento, where you still get that essence of the Caribbean. But if you want, then you are allowed to take your heat personal level to where you want it, without spoiling the food.
Right. Because pepper is a tolerance level, isn't it? How much pepper you can.
It's individual, but you can't then overcook with the spice, because then you lose the taste of the dish overall.
Right. Now, interesting enough, I paired this, and I'm going to put it out there. I paired this with a spiced rum, right? I'm going to throw it out there, particularly to our rum geeks, in terms of what would you use a spice, and if you did, what spiced?
I would say Chairman spice.
Yay! That's exactly what I was thinking.
That's one of my favorite spice. I love it.
That's the only one I bother with, to be honest.
Oh well, that's not fair. But
sorry, that's bad, isn't it? I shouldn't have said it.
Kelvin.
Well, there's a spice rum in Curacao called Kilokai,
right?
Which for me, I think it will work with that. Just reading that, because Kilokai has a very nice spicy scent to it. It's full of vanilla, full of caramel. That will work really nicely with that one, 100%.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't think many people know of that particular one, but that one comes to mind.
Right. Well, I'm going to surprise you all. I initially looked at Chairman Spice because I'm also fond of Chairman Spice. I do use Chairman Spice a bit later on, so I've not ignored Chairman Spice. But my take on it is that Chairman has some really fabulous spicy notes, but it also has some fruity notes to it, especially orange and a bit of orange zest on Chairman Spice. So I actually went, surprisingly enough, for a rum that gave. Because I felt as if the recipe lacked spice, I went with a rum that was less fruity and more caramel spice notes. And I actually went with original Kraken, a nice black spiced rum that is actually got some heavy spice notes and got some robustness that I felt as well would marry well with the honey. But it's a matter. Look, when we recommend rums to people, it's just a recommendation. Some of the chefs have actually used specific rums, as you saw earlier on. But the bottom line is that you can experiment with your rums. Use a rum that you think would work. We just giving you our views on what styles of rum we think would work best. So, I can see
where you're going with the Kraken, though, for the cola. Like, Kraken is kind of, I can see that.
This is it will give you a sweeter, for people who like that, that kind of sweet barbecue kind of flavor. With the Kraken, with the cola, you definitely get that.
Right. Right. And my next recipe, let's see if I can find my next recipe. So we're going to move into the category of beef. And I've got to see whether I can. Oh, there you go. All right. Now, this one is from the book Table Manners. All right. From Chef Chris Zamore. His restaurant is called Chris on the Grill if you ever get out to Antigua. And this is his barbecue beef ribs sauce. So I've given you the recipe for the sauce on screen. Obviously, he's has a recipe on how he cooks his ribs. But as we're talking about the rum, here we now find the use of soy sauce and mustard.
Yeah.
And he specifically mentions the type of rum to use.
Right.
Yes, I can. Somebody's just asked a question as to whether we will provide these recipes online. I think if you make your requests on specific recipes, we can post them up bit by bit. There's a lot of recipes to post up there, and I can sort the recipes. Some of them I can source you to links where you can find them. But yes, if you're very keen, we can sort of start posting up on a sort of periodic basis for the recipes. But yes, let's get back to his the mustard. What's the mustard and what do I say? Mustard and soy sauce. My mother used soy sauce in a lot of her meat marinades. And I found that quite interesting. And it was like a base. You know, some people would use olive oil is to sort of enable you the spices to gel together, so you can rub it all together rather than it just be the dry spices. And she would always use a light soy sauce. What is soy sauce and mustard going to bring, Chef?
No, well, with the soy, we are in Caribbean cookery. We had a lot of influence, like with the Chinese when they came and they brought their style of cooking to the Caribbean. You know, so they brought that soy sauce, and we adapted in the marinades that we had in, you know, like while the food, you know, was developing. You tend to see it used. People use it when they for stewing their chicken, or as it's used here in the sauce for the with the beef. But it's one of those you know, that it adds flavor. It adds a certain depth of flavor, you know, and
right.
it also the salt. It helps with that kind of saltiness, you know, and flavoring of a pot, and easier. With mustard and beef work. You understand?
Well, so, I'm guilty, because whenever I have a grilled steak, and you go to a restaurant and they ask you, what do you want? Peppercorn? What are some of the usual standard sauces they list off? No, just bring me English mustard, please. Because that's all I need with my steak. And usually you don't have to pay for the English mustard or any of the mustards. Whereas all the other sauces, there's £1 or £2 for the sauce. And I said, no, bring me mustard, please. So mustard, I agree with you, it works there as well. And Manny, you know English Harbour 5 as well as I do. Obviously, an Antiguan chef. He called for English Harbour 5 to be used in this. And as we know, English Harbour 5 sort of has that brown sugar, cinnamon note, that honey note that sort of balances well here. Do you think it's a good fit?
Yeah, it's a great fit. It's gonna, with the soy sauce, it's gonna balance quite well, because there's lots of umami flavors in there that are gonna kind of counteract those rich notes in the English Harbour 5. Right. I actually use soy sauce when I make jerk. I use soy sauce.
Yeah,
right.
Myself, yeah.
Right.
One thing in the dish also, you see the Antiguan honey. You know, I had the opportunity of trying that when I did the series with Gary Rhodes, and when we visited there, and it is that special. You understand that it does give a certain different flavor profile to the dish. It will definitely do that.
So here we have a organic Antiguan honey.
Nice.
Who's supplying you?
So that one, unfortunately, I picked up on my last trip to Antigua. So it's not a local product that I got here anyway. So that was not something that was obtained very easily. So moving on, I have a recipe which doesn't use rum, but I included it because Guyanese pepper pot, which is a traditional Christmas dish, seasonal, just like we mentioned last week, Kelvin, when you talked about certain drinks in the Caribbean are seasonal. We talked about rum punches and that certain rum punches were seasonal. This is a seasonal dish in Guyana. You can get it all year round. Pepper pot, you can see it there. It's really black and rich, and that comes from the cassareep. But however, this recipe was created for somebody who lived abroad and couldn't get cassareep, a Guyanese that couldn't get cassareep, right? And therefore, he, as you see at the bottom, it had a cassareep substitute. And that one, and because cassareep gives that sort of black molasses flavor and coloring, he felt as if he wanted to use molasses. And as we know, molasses is the base for rum. You must have had pepper pot in your time, chef.
Definitely, that is it's one of those dishes where, because of the you know, when you get those slow cooks, you understand, so the flavors, so all of that cinnamon, all of that clove, but the cassareep is what gives the dish its identity.
Really. Right, and just so that people don't know, cassareep is the way it's cooked is from the cassava root. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's it can be made where it's boiled down and stuff, but it's a long process to be made naturally. It is available in some independent shops in the UK, but it's definitely one of those like, you know, it's, say for instance, if you're doing jerk and you don't have pimento, it's not really jerk. You understand? So if you're doing
pepper pot and
if you're doing the pepper pot and you don't have the
it's not the same. But that's quite interesting that he didn't have any cassareep and he made it from molasses, vinegar, and some lime juice there as well. It's quite interesting. This second recipe, because one of the early recipes, I think it was a Guadeloupean chicken recipe, called for red vinegar, and here we have vinegar again, Manny. What does vinegar bring in terms of, because vinegar brings a level of acidity?
Well, yeah, it brings acidity, but it also gives you some fruit notes as well. So kind of it brings out other flavors. It's interesting that he would use vinegar to substitute for cassareep. I wouldn't have thought that would work, but it seems.
And maybe to cut back on the sweetness of the molasses.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's using 4 tablespoons of molasses, which would be sweeten that. So
that's about 60 mils, if anybody is of molasses there, and also equally, he's obviously he's getting acidity from the vinegar and the fresh lime juice. So he's got
so that balances that molasses out completely.
Yeah. And just so that I can make some comments to people who are listening in, oxtail is it's now a delicacy globally. Oxtail was one of those dishes that in the Caribbean was quite commonly a dish for poor people, because the spare parts of the animals that weren't wanted by the hotels and the people who wanted the lean meats would quite often get sold cheaply, and therefore we would use. And oxtail, I grew up in oxtail, and quite often those spare parts, like we mentioned, the fish head, now we have the oxtail. The traditional Caribbean will eat pig's feet or cow foot. They actually bring a flavor profile that is amazing. And does anybody want to comment on oxtail and what the sort of it's how it tastes and so forth?
Well, I can't comment because, sorry, I'll say it again, I'm not an oxtail eater. So
it's very rich. It's a really rich meat. It's really, really rich, and you cannot compare it to beef. It's very much like what the fish head does for soup. You're right in that it gives you a massive injection of beef flavor with the fat, because it's all in the fat of that oxtail, isn't it? So
also
it's warming.
The marrow, the bone coming out into the stew also gives it that extra flavor. But with oxtail, you find it's one of those dishes that even the British, because when they were not able to get their best, it was one of the cuts that they used to use in the old, in previous times. So if you look at Caribbean restaurants in the UK, you'd find that there's everybody likes it there. You know, it's everybody's coming in to try the oxtail. You know, so they especially
and it's
the local.
And you know, we always used to say, you know, when you get good oxtail is when the chef has bothered to cook it slowly until it falls off the bone.
Yeah.
Right. You should not have to fight to get the meat off the bone.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's one of those that culturally, we like bones because bones carry a lot of flavors, and you actually quite often spend a lot of time. And the oxtail through the middle's got the sort of the marrow, so you spend time sucking on the bone and getting the rest of the flavors out. If I think this recipe could also benefit from the use of a rum, don't you?
I was going to ask what kind of rum, because I'm thinking of what rum could go with that.
Be a dark rum.
But which one will give it the flavor profile, a good flavor profile with all those ingredients that's there? Because while everyone's talking, I'm trying to think. I can't.
Well, let's think of Guyana in terms of what you'd use. So you'd probably use an El Dorado rum. So if I thought of it, maybe using is an El Dorado 12 bringing too much sweetness to it?
No, because
I think it has the 15.
Yeah.
15 probably.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Maybe because the 12 will be a bit too sweet in that one still.
And how would you add the rum? At what stage would you add the rum, Hassan?
No, you see, with rum, once you start to cook it longer, the alcohol presence will evaporate. You know, and you tend to get more the back notes of the flavor. So I would look for earthy. You know, something that gives you that kind of earthy finish, because with the pepper pot, it's, you know, and once you have the castorip, you know, there's the brown sugar, there's the cloves in there, so it's the thyme again. So it's any rum that kind of will or have similar notes, you know, flavors will work.
So a nice earthy, a good agricole would work again.
Pardon?
An agricole might work again, something with that earthy flavor notes as well.
It could work, but I think it might. It might be a bit strong, you know.
Right.
Yeah, I think with this is a nice something, a nice, as we said, maybe a 12-year, something like that, with some age in it, a little more depth in the profile.
Right, and I think the El Dorado, the older El Dorados, are quite rich in flavor as well. There's a lot of depth with that sweetness as well. So I think that actually would bring something to the table. So, we've now finished with, we've done chicken, we've done beef, we've had our starters, and I am not ignoring the new generation. We are going to look at some vegetarian and vegan recipes. Now, let me tell you that you should thank me if you're vegetarian or vegan, because in the Caribbean, we don't cater for vegetarians or vegans very well. Not to say
you're wrong.
However, because
you're wrong.
because of the current trends and the amount of people at them, there's far more dishes in the Caribbean that have been adapted to work for vegetarians and vegans, and some new dishes created. So I'm wrong in the sense of, yes, there are Caribbean dishes, so don't be put off by going, because everywhere you go now you can get vegetarian options. And obviously the Rastas who eat what we call idle food.
Let me clarify one thing, because, you know, like now everybody, as you said, is vegan and they're into this plant-based, but the Rastafarian, their diet mainly was that was
always plant-based. Yeah.
No, well, most of that's the origin of some of, and some of them practice it, and that's the way of how they've been eating for, you know,
for a very long time.
This new trend now, where they're calling it, you know, plant-based and vegan. You know, I always, when I like to tell people about ital, you know, because ital is the first form of that type of eating that I knew of. You understand?
Right. Right. So, yes, we do have some vegetarian and vegan recipes here for you. Some of them, obviously, we would obviously have to ask you. This one is not vegan because you can see the use of eggs in cornbread. Cornbread is very popular across certain parts of the Caribbean. It tends to be used more as a side. Would you agree with that as something on the side of a main meal? But here we have a cornbread that uses a tablespoon of Haitian rum. Very, very easy to make. It's got a number of ingredients. Obviously, again, there's evaporated milk, so it's not vegan friendly, but it's completely vegetarian for those vegetarians that aren't willing to use certain products from animals. So, any comments on a cornbread? Pandamai from Haiti.
Well, rum can be used as an essence also, like when it comes to baking. You understand? So, just as you use your vanilla essence, you use your almond essence, all of these different. So, the rum, the Haitian rum, might be an agricole. I'm not too sure.
Interesting enough, I chose a Haitian rum. I'm not going to tell Kelvin. You can't answer because I told you earlier on which one I chose. So, Manny and Lizette, do you have any views on what Haitian rum you would use?
Maybe a Babancourt here.
Right, and you, Lizette?
I'd say the same, unfortunately.
Well,
yes.
I chose the Babancourt, but interesting enough, I chose the delicacy of the white Babancourt.
Right.
Oh, right.
Rather than, because I felt as if you don't want the rum to really, and something, a recipe like this, I didn't want the rum to really overpower, to be that dominant. And I think you mentioned, Chef, you want an essence. You want the rum to provide that essence.
It's like that hint, that little, at the back, that back taste that you get, when it's
yeah, because with a cornbread, you want to taste all those flavors coming through, like, the banana, the vanilla. You want and they put shredded coconut in there. You want those. You don't want the rum to overpower all of that. I mean, you wanted it just right at the back. So what Chef has recommended there was spot on.
Right. So there we have. Now here we have a recipe from Jamaica, and I think I'm fair to say that this is vegan.
Yes.
So another side that you can add, but this is just basically using a rum and orange juice. Manny, what does orange juice bring to the table here as a flavor? It's the first time now we've seen something that's fruity. Although plantain is technically a fruit, but it's cooked as a vegetable. So
orange juice changes when you cook it. It kind of becomes a richer, deeper flavor. Rather than acidity. It looks like it'll be quite good. And it pairs very well with cinnamon. Orange juice and cinnamon are natural flavor pairing.
Right. Is this, I cook fried plantain all the time. I've never considered using rum and orange juice, but it's something that I would consider. I mean, cinnamon, yes, but I mean, is this something that anybody would find that they would do at home and create?
I've actually had this on. I've used this in on dinners. I call it citrus baked plantain.
Right.
And what I also do is I use a nice dark brown sugar, sprinkle on it. So when it's in the oven, that even adds a bit more caramelization. And when you bake it with the orange juice, all of that flavor kind of goes, so it goes into the plantain, keeps it moist, and then you got a rum flavor in there. But then you have on top with that caramelization, and it's very, very nice as an accompaniment for dishes and stuff.
Right. And again, so we have tried to cater here for vegans, and this is I can tell you now, plantains are quite tasty. I know it was very easy for me to choose a rum here that had I chose a rum with specific banana notes. Manny or Kelvin, anything you would pick here?
With this one, I would probably pick. I'll probably pick Appleton's 12-year-old with this one.
That's interesting because Appleton brings orange notes, so that's a very good choice.
I will definitely pick that one. I think, as what Chef said, when it goes in the oven with the orange, and it soaks in the plantain, I think that will taste incredible.
Maybe Mount Gay Black Barrel as well could work.
Okay. I actually went. Lizette, do you think anything?
Yeah, I'm thinking again, like definitely Jamaican, because it's got that overripe banana kind of. That dunda would work very well with that, and then also we've got some rums here that would probably work very well. The Old Grog being one, which is a bit over the top of banana. Old
Grog is that is. I used to swear blind. There's so much banana in Old Grog. I said you've got to have added it.
I don't know, but I do think it's a good one to stick in there.
But I thought of using a rum bar, an unaged rum bar with those heavy banana notes that you get from that Jamaican rum bar.
Yeah.
So I thought that. So here, next recipe for our vegans. We have something quite interesting here. Some vegetable rice paper rolls.
Yeah.
And the rum aspect of it is a rum dip. Who wants to kick me off while I go and check my pot?
Oh, you mean?
Yeah. This dish is
Go on, check your pot, Roger. Yeah, Chef.
So I've done this using the rice paper noodles, so that you just soak that normally in water, to rehydrate it, and with the fresh, again, this a lot of citrus, fresh, like flavors, a lot of herbs among the pineapple.
So all the rum goes in the actual dip itself. So you wouldn't add the rum with the vegetable. Okay, that's interesting.
So, but I'm watching, like, if you want to be even more rummy, because normally with the rice, you have to soak it in water, so you can't even add a little drop of rum
within it. Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, that sounds much better, because I think just having the rum only in the dip, it's going to be slightly boring. You want to taste the flavors, and especially if you're using a Mangay Eclipse rum. I'll say I'll add it in both just to get a nice balance. That will taste wicked.
Well, the basil and the mint in the rice paper roll will definitely complement the papaya and the carrots, and that kind of lift it quite a bit. And then the rum dip is really like the coating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Quite fresh.
So, Chef, I've just added the rum, so I've just left it to simmer. So, good, nice 15 minutes, and it should be ready.
Well, no, I just want to check what time is my delivery going to be at the
and it's quite, going back to this recipe as well, that we you notice I slipped out of that one quite quickly, but going back to this recipe, this shows some of the versatility of the Caribbean chefs as well, because this is not, by no way would you look at this as a traditional Caribbean dish in the slightest, but here he's taken, what would you say, more Japanese style.
I think it's Vietnamese.
Vietnamese style of cooking. I had to look up what the hell julienne meant, but I managed to...
It's a cut of vegetables. So when there's batons, there's julienne, there's...
But I just thought that it was, but the dip, because we've seen a lot of marinades in the past, and the marinades tend to be cooked, or the glazes are cooked with whether in the past it was meat and so forth. Here now, you've created a dip, which is obviously cooked beforehand, but it's now cooked separately as a dip. And not added to the meat, it's served on the side. So I'm assuming that dip would probably be allowed to cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Is it heated up? This looks like it's just blended together, because it's not heated up.
It says at the bottom for dip.
Yeah, at the bottom is
Heat molasses, rum, lime juice, and reduce and thicken.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So it's just heat it up and then cool down. So when it cools down, it's gonna be nice and sticky, like that kind of teriyaki kind of finish.
Right. And also, so here now, pineapple or orange juice. Any preference on the table? Manny?
Half and half.
Oh, interesting.
Half and half sounds good to me.
And what do each of them bring differently in terms of profile to it? I mean, obviously they both have specific flavor profiles, but you think they would benefit from the flavor profiles of that orange and that pineapple?
The pineapple is a slightly different texture as well, isn't it? So it's going to add a little bit more dexterity to the sauce itself, whereas the orange is going to be thinner. They both have fairly high amounts of acidity. So if you want some acidity, you're going to get it from both.
And rum, anybody got any thoughts on what rum they would have used? Did he say? Oh, he did. He said Mount Gay Clips.
That's the right thing.
Yeah. He said Mount Gay Clips. And actually, one of Paul Yellin quotes that when they asked him why does he like using Mount Gay Clips, and he says it offers a perfect amount of wood and sugar to marinades. Which was quite interesting because technically I just saw that people add Mount Gay is not a sweetened rum, so there is actually no sugar added to Mount Gay. So when he talks about sugar, he's talking about not physical actual sugar added to the rum, but that sweet note that you get from the rum.
Yeah.
So he's not specifically talking about sugar. And interesting enough, from Paul Yellin, I also picked up another recipe from him. And I don't want to be, I want to make it clear that book Infusion that Paul Yellin does, I deliberately picked the two vegan-vegetarian recipes. He has a whole host of meat, fish, and a number of other recipes, and also bacon recipes in the book. But I didn't pick any of those because I wanted to show the flair in terms of vegetarian and vegan cooking. So here what we have is is Spicy Island slaw. So coleslaw in a sense that obviously he's not using any mayonnaise, which is obviously good for the vegans. So you're just basically using the fresh ingredients, dicing them, cabbages, carrots, sweet pepper, the typical things that you would use in a coleslaw, yes? And now what he's created, for what we've seen now, because it's a salad, he's now created a dressing. And quite often, interesting enough with this dressing, how often normally with dressings do you see olive oil? But not here. The liquid side of the dressing is just coming from the rum and the vinegar. Is that, do you find, but there are dressings that I've made dressings with vinegar. I'm not a big vinegar fan in dressings. I find the taste of vinegar a bit sharp. Anybody want to comment on, do they use vinegar in their dressings?
No.
I use vinegar, but with vinegars, there are different types of vinegars. Like there's the balsamic that has a bit more sweetness. Even when you reduce it, it gets even sweeter. We do a dish with our escovitch in Spice Shoots in Oxford, and we use a champagne vinegar to finish. So it's adding a different finish in terms of, because sometimes when people hear vinegar, they think of that malt vinegar, they think of that natural white vinegar, but there are other there's sherry vinegar, there's other vinegars that can be added and add flavor to and divert complexity to dishes.
Right. Yeah. And anybody and again he's used Mount Gay Eclipse rum, as we know. That was his preference.
But also, I think.
Go on. Sorry, Lizette.
I was going to say the sugar will balance out the extreme acidity of the vinegar, and coleslaw is sometimes you add vinegar to even normal coleslaw because you need a little bit of that tanginess to coleslaw.
Right.
So
And I sort of
the spices and the sugar and the garlic to kind of balance the acidity of the vinegar.
And I thought that what the rum brought as well was, and you know Mount Gay quite well, Manny, but Mount Gay Eclipse has that slightly burnt note, which I think contrasts well with the brown sugar notes. And it brings that fruitiness, which I think would contrast well with the acidity of the vinegar as well.
Yeah. Also, you have to remember vinegar is just an acid. You want to use it to kind of balance. Like the rest of the ingredients are quite sweet too. I mean, carrot, cabbage, and red cabbage all have their sweet notes in them. So the vinegar and the rum are going to balance well there.
Right, and so we can finish off on the vegetarian and the vegans, and we've given you a few recipes. I have a couple of sauces and marinades, which I don't want to label on, but just sort of typical in the Caribbean of these sauces. Obviously, the picture shows it being used on meat, but clearly you don't have to use the sauces on meat. This is the when you do barbecues or you can use the sauce in terms of adding it to add flavor. And here we see the use of jerk. And, let's talk a little bit about jerk. Let's pick a Jamaican. Manny, you're part Jamaican. What's your...
Yeah. This recipe actually looks like something I make sometimes. When I have a barbecue, I do a part jerk and part of my family is Chinese. So I add a slightly Asian element to it. So I add rum and baijiu to a jerk sauce.
Right. Okay.
But this looks delicious.
Yeah. And soy sauce is vegan, please correct me. It is, isn't it?
Soy sauce is vegan.
Yeah. Okay. And just so I don't labor too long on it. Liquid smoke. I had to Google that.
Yeah.
I've never come across that.
It is the artificial flavor that gives you that smokiness without having to be on the barbecue pit. You understand?
Okay.
Okay.
So it's used a lot in a lot of processed foods and stuff. Or if you just want you want to add that extra smoky punch to a sauce or something, a bit of liquid smoke. They use it in sausages and stuff also.
No.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay. And anybody want to take a pitch on the rum? What rum would you use?
Ooh.
But Manny, you cook. You say you do something similar. What would you use?
I usually use something Jamaican aged, like a 12. Appleton 12 works.
Right.
But it depends what you're looking for. Or sometimes I use unaged. If I'm using baijiu, because baijiu is generally unaged too.
I would try a St. James Cuvée. There is excellence in that one.
Right. All right. Lizette, any rums in particular?
Yeah, I would probably go for Jamaican or Bajan, either of the two.
Right. And chef?
With any dark age, it doesn't need to be an aged rum, but a nice dark rum, because again you're looking for that kind of caramel sugar flavor, that those kind of anything that has that kind of essence to help with the
right.
Well, the smokiness.
I actually went for a Myers original dark rum because I wanted something I wanted that caramel note
the caramel. That's anything with that kind of caramel note would work.
Yeah. And my last vegetarian marinade comes from Mr. Executive Chef Angel Rock. He actually runs a restaurant called the Cuba Libre Restaurant and Rum Bar in Washington, D.C. Again, the picture is one of his recipes where he uses it on that. Looks like belly pork, doesn't it? But this is a marinade that is, looking at it, it's also a vegan marinade that obviously can be used. Obviously, the jalapeno peppers, I would say, if you're got affinity that you're not into heat, keep away from 9 ounces of jalapeno peppers. But this is obviously a large mix here, isn't it? Because technically a cup is would they use chefs use the same measurements as bartenders? A cup is 240 mils.
Yeah, it depends on well, it's American. There's an American recipe in it, so yeah. He does do the conversion. But one good point that I've seen in the last few recipes that you put up is that it's showing that you can use rum in different ways. You know, so a lot of people normally know rum as in desserts, but you're seeing it where it's been used in a dressing, it's been used in a marinade, it's been used in a sauce. You know, so it's time to use that rum that you have in your cupboard, not just for making rum punches or a cocktail or tipping, but to add flavor and add some vibes to your dishes when you're cooking.
Right. Now, my giveaway here is I also use the spiced rum, and you know which one now because I mentioned it earlier. But the chef calls for the ingredients in his marinade to draw out the spice, caramel, and citrus notes in an aged or dark rum. And I went for the Chairman spice here. Personally, I didn't go for a dark rum. I went for the Chairman spice because I felt as if it gave you all of the compliments that you're looking for, the spice, the caramel, and the citrus. Would anybody call for something different?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, you've.
I agree with you, the Reverend.
Yeah.
Right, so we haven't finished. So I am going to offer you another traditional recipe, which I discovered, and I had a couple of recipes from this island, and we are back into a variety of meat, a stew. I was unable to get a recipe, so let's talk this through. I was unable to get a recipe for this, but this is, sorry to have misspelled Puerto Rico, but this recipe is the definition on Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
So this is obviously a stew. It's a variety of meats because we see in there there's chicken, smoked ham, top round beef, pork feet.
Yeah. A lot of similarities to the pepper pot also. Yeah. If you in terms of it's those different meats, layers of different meats, and then you have the spices, the thyme, and with rum being added to it, more fun,
Right, and they also they looked at somebody wants to comment. They've added wine. Red or white wine would you have gone with here?
I would say red.
Chicken.
Because I guess it's chicken. Pork, beef. There's beef in there as well, right?
Yeah, there is some short rib. Yeah, there is some short rib. But I mean, traditionally in Trinidad, when I looked at this, I think of your corn soup.
No, but you see, corn soup is vegetarian. This
I know.
Yeah.
But my viewpoint was that I could easily see this recipe being done in a vegetarian manner and not using the meats.
Yeah, so you could add you can have callaloo, you can have pumpkin, you can have different. Yeah, they can be substituted with different textures of vegetable, and even having some cassava, yam, and stuff in there.
Right. Yeah.
Option. Yeah.
To give you some, and I'm not Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. Towards the end, you can see that a variety of tubers, guinejos, sofrito, and sazon. Does anybody know what the hell they are?
So that's the same thing I was saying to you. Like tubers and sofritos are like the cassavas, the potatoes, the sweet potatoes, all of these different.
So it's the provisions.
Yeah, ground provision.
Ground provisions, what we call it in Jamaica, right? And but I'm a sucker. I love soup, so this for me all day long. Would anybody like to stick their neck out and choose a rum, and why?
That's a good one.
I would choose a young rum, a white rum,
Right. And you went with the white wine as well because you look more on the chicken.
Yeah,
white meat, right?
There's other meats in there, but in terms of I think with it's not a heavy like the other soup. The first soup we looked at before in the beginning, where it had that rich kind of bisque finish with the tomato and stuff. This doesn't look at it that it has that kind of depth, but you know.
You see, again, for me, because of the beef and the pork element that's in there, because pork, correct me if I'm wrong, beef and pork normally is good with red wine, right?
Well, yeah, I can see your point there.
Can be white wine too.
So the chicken is just one element only that uses the white wine part of it. So that's why I would have gone straight for the red wine.
Yeah.
And then I would have also gone for a dark rum as well, to put in that one. But I can see the chef side of things as well. You know?
No, I'm looking at it, you know, with the other flavors that, you know, with the ground provision and
right,
the rest of the thyme and the herbs, you know, I think, you know, it's one of these things where I think this dish can work with either or, honestly.
I was going to say I would agree with the white or the light rum, maybe a
light, yeah, like a light,
more than a white one. Just because as well, it's got pork feet, and that's really gelatine, and that you'd want something thin and light to kind of separate it a bit. I don't know, but I can't imagine what it tastes like because there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, there's I think I'll pass on this dish.
But I would
yeah, that dish I'll pass on.
Well, I intend on making this dish, and as it's from Puerto Rico, I thought of a lighter style rum is that I would have gone for Bacardi or Don Q.
That's me. That's how I felt about it, honestly.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's get.
It be in Puerto Rico, that kind of, you know.
Yeah. So let's get a little bit interesting. And guess what you're having now? So this is another Spanish Caribbean, which is another dish called Chivo Guisado Picante, right? And we now see the use of goat meat, and there you have it.
Oh, you've made it.
Roger.
So there you have it. So I'm gonna taste a little bit while you guys are talking about it.
No, but you need to taste it and tell us about it.
I'm gonna get a spoon, but the only difference, I'm gonna get a fork. The only difference to the recipe that I, from what you see listed, that I did differently is my marinade is I learned a lesson being many years ago, and another one that my mother taught me is when I buy meat in bulk, and what I do is then I will cut it up, I will season it, bag it, and freeze it with the seasoning, right? So when you therefore defrost that meat, you then don't have the issue of having to season it and wait, because the seasoning has, the marinade has got into the meat while it was freezing and remains there during the freeze process. So that's
the way our granny used to do it, you know?
There you go. So, and that makes life easier because when it's defrosted, it's ready to cook. There's none of this having to season and wait. But everything else is to spec. And I will tell you now, I used, as it was from Dominican Republic, my apologies. I use this one, which is Brugal, the 1888. It's an aged rum. And I use the Brugal as a Dominican rum. Brugal has sort of brown sugar toffee notes. It sort of has some stewed red fruits like guava and berries. And I felt as if those notes would goat meat has a slightly sweeter note to it than other notes, other meats, and the rum is quite oaky and it's got some cocoa notes as well, which gives you some depth of flavors. And goat can be a little bit gamey, and I thought that would give a bit of balance. So let me taste it while somebody talks about that recipe. Does it look interesting?
Yeah, it looks interesting. So you said, Roger, you used the Brugal 1888. It was the Grand Reserva. So I didn't see the bottle properly.
Yes, yeah.
It's a Grand Reserva, right? Yeah, that will work wicked in that one.
And it was in the marinade, the rum?
No. The rum in this recipe. So basically, the how it was done was you'd cook the meat, you'd brown the meat, right?
Okay.
And you tend to brown the meat because you find out when you brown meat, it seals the flavors.
Yeah, you seal in the flavors. You seal in and without it drying up inside, so it's nice and moist. Yeah.
Right, and then after but before you fry it in a caramelized brown sugar, and I used the light muscovado sugar in this one. I just sort of think the muscovado sugar brings a sort of that flavor profile, that sort of molasses type profile to the caramelization of the sugar. And then after you've browned the meat, and then what you do is you add water, and then you leave it to stew down until the meat becomes tender and the meat cooks. Once that's done, then you'll add your other ingredients, your seasoning back in, because obviously you scrape off the seasoning off the meat before you fry it and brown it, because you don't want the seasoning to burn. And then you add your seasoning back in, along your marinade seasoning back in, along with the other ingredients of fresh cilantro. Cilantro, by the way, is coriander. I use fresh tomatoes and cut up a Scotch bonnet. Leave it to stew down in that, and then after it's sat in that for a good 30-40 minutes, I topped it up with the rum and let the rum cook for about 15 minutes.
I'm going to try 100%.
So
rice and peas.
Chef, I mean, this is pretty much how, apart from it being goat, we usually use chicken, how we stew meat here.
That's stew good. Yeah, stew good.
We stew meat with sugar, and in Jamaica, they don't stew with sugar.
No, they don't.
No, so this is, it's interesting to see that in Dominican Republic as well, they're stewing with sugar, because I thought it was only Trinidad and Grenada that did that.
No, I've seen it done in St. Lucia a bit, but a lot of like that caramelization, because when people like I've done it where I'm working with European chefs and they're thinking I'm gonna be making a dessert, and then when they see I'm putting meat, they're thinking that the meat is going to be sweet. But then when you add all of those other savory ingredients, the tomatoes, the acidity of all that, it's that's that perfect balance that we find in our Caribbean, fusion cookery that we do. Like a lot of people like it's very hard to get that balance. It's like when I look at it, is that you have that yin and yang when you with food, and even when you're doing cocktails, you need to get that balance of flavor, and with the sweet and the caramelization of the sugar, and then you have that acidity of the other, the tomatoes, and then flavors of the spices. That's why our food is so unique, in that region.
Yeah.
Right. Can I comment quickly that as always, it's traditional for we do run on Caribbean time in Caribbean Rum Chronicles. So we're into what we call extra time, which is traditional for our remaining half an hour. We've always run over time, but we get so fascinated with our recipes and our conversation that it's hard. Caribbean time, we take it easy. So, so I hope you stay with us for a little longer, because I will definitely cut off at 9, even if we haven't finished our recipes. And if the Zavvi listeners can't continue on, because if Zavvi has to close at 8:30, then I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope that you will join us again. We are learning to manage our time better, but you never know. Freddie might just keep you running for a little bit longer, just so that I don't know how his platform works in that respect. So, but we have some seafood and fish recipes coming up. So if you want to hang on to discuss those, then that would be fabulous. But that goat is going to go down with a treat of I have some white rice cooked, and I have some cabbage and some curly kale to steam, because
So what time we coming over? Yeah.
I'm waiting for my delivery, man. Let's send my delivery. What's going on?
And just so that people understand, when you look at recipes, you make your adjustment, because I didn't have 1.8 kilos of goat because I'm cooking for me, right? So I had about half a kilo of goat. So you just adjust your proportions accordingly so that you can balance the recipe. So, you can make simple adjustments. So use less of the ingredients just so that you get the balance of the ingredients right. As long as you adjust that balance across all the ingredients. So if you're going to cut everything by half, cut it all by half. If it's a third, cut all by a third, so that the balance remains between the ingredients. So that was it. Now, one of my favorite recipes that I'm looking forward to trying is the next recipe. This is from a chef in Barbuda, and I do like. So this is from the executive chef Andrea Coppola. So I suspect he might be Italian. At the Beach House in Barbuda, and this is his rum and coconut milk sauce. We'll talk quickly about the sauce, and then I'll tell you and I'll show you what the sauce is going to go on to. So again, we've seen different sauces. We've seen rum and coconut used before. Again, Barbuda is part of Antigua, so it's an island of Antigua, but it's the same country jurisdiction. And he's used English Harbour 5 again. Those raisin notes, I think, will work well with English Harbour 5, Manny. You would agree there?
They work perfect, yeah.
And the brown sugar as well with the English Harbour 5. So the recipe is not too far off what we've seen before. What he used it for was, I'll show you a picture, is that he used it in a lobster beef tenderloin.
Wow.
So
yeah, it has to be a steak. Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
That's amazing. That looks beautiful.
So the lobster, so in between the beef tenderloin is the lobster. So the lobster is wrapped with the beef tenderloin.
That's crazy.
And a really beautiful recipe. I mean, I'm sorry, but the recipe is not there. It is.
Incredible.
With the ingredients in it, so for the sauce, you see, like the beef, the raisins, those coconut milk. What if you go back?
Yeah. Some coconut milk.
Amazing. I want it now.
That's working.
You would think in this recipe they'll use a wine, like a nice white wine with this one, because for the lobster aspect. But then the beef looks like is more what's the word I'm using for? There's a more percentage of beef than lobster. So
it's a surf and turf.
So the English Harbour, I think, would work perfectly with both.
Is it wrapped in a pastry as well?
Yeah, it looks like that. And then
here you have
thing. It's delicious.
It's like a Wellington.
So the method is you wrap each piece of beef tenderloin around a piece of shelled cooked lobster tail. Wow. Slice each tenderloin roll into 2 serving portions. Grill the plantain slices on the side and wrap a grilled plantain slice around each lobster tenderloin portion and secure it with a toothpick. Place the lobster tender portions in the coconut milk to marinate for 20 minutes. Drain the portions and reserve the coconut milk. And it's interesting. So he has the coconut milk sauce recipe, which is, as you can see, which is reduced in a frying pan. And then there's a fruit compote, right, which he creates using the lime juice, the olive oil, the chopped mint. With mixed dress the fruits with tomato slices, set aside to marinate. Grill the marinade mango, tomato, pineapple, and avocado slices on each side for 1 minute, and cut the fruit into rounds using a 2.5-inch pastry cutter and set aside. So both of these, so the beef would be served with these, as you can see, going back to the picture, so we can salivate on that just one more time.
Yeah. Please, let's do that. Wow.
I mean,
It's a winner for me.
That's
and the
art,
fact that
that's
it's
art,
plantain instead of pastry. I thought it was pastry, but it's even better that it's plantain.
It's a plantain.
Flipping hell, this is another one. That's like Tim's last week. You've won.
I mean,
well done by the chef. That's
Yeah.
amazing dish.
Is the chef? Did they have this restaurant name at the beginning?
The Beach House.
Beach House. Okay, I'm going to remember that. I'm going to write that down. The Beach House.
No, Barbuda.
Yeah,
Barbuda.
Yeah, so Barbuda. And
Barbuda. Right.
I have got to say that's got to be the best surf and turf I've ever wanted to taste in my life.
I will kill that, man.
Yeah.
So we got a winner there. Let's see what the reactions are from everybody else. Meredith is asking that she mentioned she'd reduce that down. It's a previous recipe after the marinade and use it to baste afterwards.
But you can what you can make with that is a nice if you have a nice rum jus.
Yeah. But Meredith, just drop me another message saying which recipe that you were referring to that you'd use it in. And Jack Scott, ED10, or did you mean El Dorado doesn't make a 10? So were you talking about the English Harbour 10? So just a few comments that were coming up there. Jim Burton talks about his mother recipe for the previous one was quite similar to this, and I'm sure a lot of these recipes are good. Jack Scott earlier on mentioned that in the plantain, I think he's talking about, he'd use rum bar overproof. When you're cooking, be careful when you're cooking with rum, because you've got to remember some overproof rums obviously are very flammable. So be very, very careful when you're cooking, especially if you're going to use them.
You see this one, I would stay away. I would stay away from this.
You got the sunset. You got the sunset there. So be very careful when you're cooking with rums.
Stuff like that, because if you want to use it and if you need to flambe, you can use it like in a ladle or a spoon, and then you light it with a match instead of going straight to the fire with those stronger rum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, be very careful. Remember, rum is alcohol. It is a flammable liquid. So be very careful when working with open flames. I don't want anybody getting injured, because I do want you to try these recipes. Some of them are absolutely amazing, as you can see. So please feel free to try these recipes, but be very careful when you're cooking them. So let's move on quickly, because we're running out of time in terms of our limit. And I'm going to go back to what is so traditional for the Caribbean that people must be wondering why I've not mentioned it, is pork. And we love our pork in the Caribbean. And I know we love our pork in Jamaica. Obviously Muslim. You may have less pork in Trinidad because you have a strong
No. Trinidad is. I remember about maybe 10 years ago going to Trinidad, and there were people traveling near and far to go and have barbecued pigtail. You understand? Wow. At this one place, So I remember being in St. Lucia, and there was this place like Pork City. You go there, and like at lunchtime, you would see maybe 6, whole animals there, ready. By the evening, when you go back, all the meat has gone. You understand? So pork is very.
This is not. Just by the way, this is not included in today's recipe, but as you just mentioned it, rum glazed pig's tail.
Yes, that's massive. That's massive now in Trinidad, like barbecue pigtail. It's one of those kind of, especially when you're drinking, because of the salt, and then you have that some people might have their rum in the glaze, or that sweetness of the barbecue with either like guava jam or some sort of citrus in it. It's proper drinking food.
Right. So here we have another traditional Puerto Rican recipe. I've managed to spell Puerto Rico right this time, called pernil. So this is using the pork shoulder or the butt. What part of the pork is the butt? They're not talking about the backside, are they?
It's near there.
The vicinity.
So around that side, okay.
All right, so we see
wrong there, so.
That's probably the sweetest part of the meat as well. So, so here we see some traditional herbs that we've seen before using oregano. Oregano is a really beautiful herb to work with. It really brings a lot of character to food, I think. And so we've got thyme, some bay leaves. Bay leaves. It's interesting enough. I always used to. When my mother cooked rice and peas, you had to put a bay leaf in the rice and peas while it was boiling up. So that was always that's how I learned about bay leaves.
With bay leaves, I use bay leaves, especially with, you see those longer stews. And if you want that flavor that you remember that your granny used to cook, or because these are some of the things that you don't find. And then like when you are in Europe, you don't get, anytime I go, anybody's coming back, they need to bring bay leaf from the Caribbean for me, because it's a different.
It's a different.
Yeah.
I find
I call it the magic leaf. The magic leaf. I call it.
Yeah.
You know?
I feel you're right in saying that, because the ones that you get here, well, the ones I've tried, the flavors.
No.
Well, it's called boaden, and it's West Indian bay leaf. It means
correct.
It's different from the baby ones that you guys get where you are in the cold climate and thing.
So that's one of the secrets that I'm willing to let out. When I a lot of my dishes, when I cook and when I'm catering, I use that, you know. And when people come to me, I'm like, I said I use the magic leaf, and they'll be like, "What's that you're talking about?" You know.
All right. So anyway,
Caribbean bay leaf, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a picture of the pernil. So as you know, if anybody is a serious pork eater, the best part of pork is the crackling. It's an art, I always think, to get good crackling. I mean, it's basically enabling you to get the pork fat to be nice and crisp. I mean, the Chinese do it quite well in their crispy belly pork, but here you have the full layer of crackling. Is there a secret to how you get crackling when you cook pork?
Yes. There's different methods of getting it. Some with scoring, some with cooking at a lower temperature and then like frying, you know, to get that salting also. You know, so there's different methods of getting that crispy crunch that people love, you know.
Right, and here we have a blend. So in cooking it down, obviously chicken stock, orange juice. I mean, is that a weird combination? I mean, would orange juice and chicken stock? I mean, why would you use chicken stock in a pork dish?
So there's no pork stock, you know, normally. So normally you don't want to take it beefy, but you want to add that extra flavor, you know, because pork is a meat that can actually it takes in flavor easily. Right. You know, once you put it in.
And technically, pork is a white meat as well. So, so the chicken stock is going to be the closest white meat stock that you're going to find. And again, the use of orange juice, adding flavors. It's really surprising here that fresh juice is, again, Manny, just brings that different flavor profile that you would add.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it pairs well with the rum, and the salt is kind of a good balance. I guess also accessibility as well. I mean, what you have available to you.
Right. And let's test the knowledge of the rum geeks. A dark Puerto Rican spiced rum. Right? Anybody can think of a dark Puerto Rican spiced rum?
Don Q make a spice, but it's not dark.
Don Q, no? Do they have a spice?
They do, yeah.
Yes, they do, yeah.
But is it dark? It's not dark, I don't think.
It's not dark, no. It's a gold spice, isn't it?
It's a gold spice.
I don't.
I will help you. I'll give you one that I thought would work well with this, but I'm not sure many of you would have had it. And this is a really interesting rum that you get in Puerto Rico. It's not exported very much. Called Ron del Barrilito.
Yeah,
right?
I never tried that one.
And Rondel Barrilito is quite interesting because from what I understand, and I'll be corrected by any Puerto Ricans, but it's an aged rum, but they spice it before putting it in the barrel.
Okay.
Makes sense.
They spice it, then age it.
They spice it, then age it. And the spice, I find with Rondel del Barrilito that they have different versions, a 2-star and a 3-star. It's got a lot of very fruity notes, so raisins and bananas. And obviously you're going to get that woody notes with the vanilla and a little bit of nuttiness as well. So I would find it more heavy on the fruitier side. And I thought with the recipe up there, that fruity side of it, particularly that they've used the orange juice, I thought would give it quite an interesting element to it.
It's similar to like the mojo, the mojo that they do in Cuba.
Right.
Yeah.
So you say they have two. One is a lighter version, and the other is a darker version, right?
The two of them are quite dark, but there's the 2-star and the 3-star. I think it's basically the aging time. That is the difference between the two.
Yeah, because I'm just googling it now because I've never heard of that one.
Rondel Barrilito. One of my quite interesting spicier rums that I have, and I drink it a lot. I drink it neat. It's
You have to bring me some next time you see me.
I don't think I have any at home. I may do if I'll double check in my cabinet. But
when you're doing it, when you put it in your next order, I would like to try one.
Yeah. And I'm going to cover a couple of quick recipes before we close down. We won't get to the seafood. We'll save that for another time. But I'm going to mention a chef that everybody, particularly in England, will know of. And he did a tour of the Caribbean, did a television series doing a tour of the Caribbean, and he, let's find his recipe, and he went from island to island looking at different ingredients and different spices from different islands, and he came up with a number of recipes from the region. And I have a couple of his recipes. The first one here, and the chef's name is Ainsley Harriott, which I'm not sure where Ainsley is traditionally from.
I thought it was
some Jamaican.
Jamaica, yeah, I think it's
Jamaica.
Because when he did that same series you're talking about, he was in Jamaica. He was doing his family.
Right.
Yeah, so it's Jamaica.
Right. And here's another thing
the series was last year, this year, early this year. They aired it.
Right. So again, the use of tamarind. Does anybody want to say what tamarind is? Explain to the people who won't know tamarind.
Tamarind is like a sour, so
very sour. It has very acidic as well, a little bit acidic as well, sour.
So if you're using you get that if you use it, you get a yin yang balance. So you have the chuku, which is sweet, and then you have the tamarind, which is that sour.
Yep. So and it gives that tangy flavor.
It also has a lot of texture as well, like a lot of viscosity.
Yeah.
As well, tamarind.
So for me, a tamarind in a dish like this,
good.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I mean, this is pork. It's pork, pork ribs.
So there you go. That's tamarind. If you can see it slightly from the side, it's got a very, it's quite black. And it's got a very sweet texture to it, and it's a fruit. And with this recipe, you see the use of a heavy amount of dark rum. We've seen a black treacle. He's used quite a heavy amount of tamarind paste as well, 5 tablespoons. So it's really rich.
This will give you you see, like when you get a plum, where you get that sour and you get that sweet. Yeah. By using the tamarind, because pork and plum works well. You understand? So the tamarind and the sweet kind of will give that kind of flavor profile of a plum, that kind of sweety sour. And it will work well with pork.
Right,
sure.
And I actually chose. He called for a dark rum. I'm not sure which island he created this recipe in. But I called for a rum actually for my American clients because that you can see that the recipes lean into that sweet sour type of note. And I don't know, maybe Manny, you've tried it, which was a Cruzan black strap.
Oh yeah, that'd be
I've had the Cruzan, but not. I can't remember the black strap as well.
Right, and the black strap, from what I understand, has got either some molasses or molasses flavoring added back to the rum to give it that black sweet note. And I felt as if that's the sort of that's the sort of rum that I would have used. And just to finish off, just a couple of more, one more, and let's see if I can find Mr. Ainsley Harriot's recipe for his sauce. And this is another recipe that he came up for. In Grenada, he came up with this recipe for a rum cream and nutmeg sauce. Yeah, and everybody who knows Grenada, Lizette, what is Grenada famous for?
Nutmeg, yeah.
Largest producers in the Caribbean, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
one of the largest in the world, right?
Probably in the world.
Indonesia.
You know, they're one of the largest in the world. Yeah.
But we're the second, at the moment, and Jamaica's coming up close. So
is that right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's known as the Spice Island, Grenada, famous for its nutmeg. Nutmeg is indigenous to India and Indonesia, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
I've been to is it Guave where the nutmeg is from? Guave?
Yeah, that's where I'm from.
Yeah. I've been there.
Oh, fantastic! That's where we are.
All right. And this was his sauce that he used to cover pork medallions. And I'm gonna finish off on this one because we won't be able to touch the seafood because it's now 3 minutes to 9, and I think we'll cut it short for the night. But this was a sauce he used. So looking at that, and I also had another recipe from the same chef in Washington, Mr. Angel Rock, from the Cuba Libre restaurant, and this he did a flambe. So, and I wanted to talk about pork medallion because flambe is a term that we didn't use, which is common for rum and cooking with rum. So, talk to me, explain what flambe is, chef.
So, flambe is adding that flame and burning off that alcohol content. You know, it can be easily done, as I was saying. You can do it like having a ladle or a teaspoonful of the rum and you lighten it with a match. Then you pouring it over the dish. It can also be done in the pot where you flame, you know, you add the rum and you get that the edge of it lighting with the fire, you know. So,
right.
But when you burn off, you know, it's burning off the alcohol, that part of it that gets you intoxicated. Where then you are left with more that the essence that they have and the flavors that the rum masters will add to, so you get more of that intensity coming out into the dish. And
can I just quickly say, just as we're finishing, he did apologize to us beforehand that he had some business commitments. But welcome, Mark Woods, Mr. Rumbling himself. Can you just say hello to say that you did contribute? We got the recipes of the Bermuda fish chowder from Mark. He has some videos which I can share the links to for you to which we'll do online for you to see how it's made and on YouTube and so forth, which he did at some of his events. Say hello, Mark, please.
Hello. I was listening in, but I was driving whilst listening, so I caught it when you put on the fish chowder recipe. I was driving back from Vancouver, so I
there from the beginning.
So you were there at the beginning anyway. So
yeah, but I couldn't contribute because I was driving, so I was showing up at the same time.
So anyway, just so that so there's no Trades Description Act. Mark Woods from Rumbling was part of the show, and I've now proven it. So, so anyway, we're going to close the show now. It's 9:01. I would like to thank my guests again for coming on board, particularly my co-host. You're just normal. You're just part and parcel of the furniture now. So particularly lots of thanks for Chef Defour, Hassan.
Thank you, man. It was I really enjoyed it. You know, it was a nice vibe, man.
we will have you back because one of the future episodes is going to be bacon and desserts with rum.
But that's where rum gets sexy, you know. So,
so we will have you back. But I will just.
We gotta get Cranston too.
Yes,
okay.
we have a ice cream specialist, you know, who
yes.
we've worked with. Mark and I have worked with before, so we can get him.
I've met him. I have met him. So yeah, we can get him involved. And just to let you know, look out for this space. Episode 4 in 2 weeks' time. We do one Caribbean Rum Chronicles every 2 weeks. Unless you guys want more demand, then you got to let us know. But you know, it gives us time to prepare the content and do research so we can give you value and what you want to see. So we will be going back to cocktails next on the next episode. We will give you our concept because, as you know, we like to keep things spicy, keep things different. So we'll give you our concept towards the end of the week when we post up as to what we're going to be doing with our cocktails, and it will be fascinating. So Paul Manny, as the one bartender on this panel, is going to be put to hard work.
I look forward to it, Roger.
But I'll try and get you some assistance. I'm going to ask. I have somebody in mind. I'm going to ask him if he'll come and help you on the bartending side. And we do have Mark as well, who obviously creates drinks as well.
Mark, so, roll up your sleeves, Mark. Roll up your sleeves.
I was going to say, when you were talking tamarind there, I have a tamarind syrup. Manny, we had to try this. I have a tamarind syrup and make it. It tastes just like a tamarind bowl.
Okay.
And just to correct for you English speakers, in the Caribbean we mispronounce everything, and tamarind is pronounced tamarind. In the Caribbean, it's pronounced tamarind.
Sorry, I forgot this. This was
subtitles next time. Subtitles.
Sorry, I apologize.
Subtitles.
So we're gonna have subtitles next time for everybody, okay?
Right, so we look forward to it. And just like in Jamaica, we have a drink, well, not Jamaica, but across the Caribbean called sorrel. But if you go into Jamaica and you tell somebody you want sorrel, they'll probably ask you, what? You mean sorrel? You mean sorrel? So say bye-bye, guys. Thanks for having you again. Thanks for all of you listeners. We will post up some of the recipes so that you guys can, if you want to make notes in anything particular. If you really want a recipe, I'd love it if you drop me a message on the Rum Reverend on Facebook or on Instagram, or if you're friends with any of the other guys in the group, drop them a message and they can get the recipes from me if they don't have the recipes.
I'm happy to help with rum recipes going forward. If anybody gets in contact with you and any questions, I'm there.
There you go. And we do hope that when the lockdown is over, in some of the future events, that we can actually broadcast from a kitchen, so that we can create something whilst we're online, and from a bar, so that we can create something whilst online, so that it gives a little bit more variety, so we can actually taste. I had a taste of one of the recipes, so next time I'll try and share it and put it in the post.
If we can find a way when we do the recipes next time, maybe to get some of those samples to
in the post.
Really interested, we can do something.
Yeah,
I'm involved. The Reverend, I need to have a word with you.
Reverend, that's fine. I'm always open for a word. So thank you again. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, guys.
All the best. All the best.
Nice.
Take care.
Okay.
And guys, can you stay online just for a quick chat after I end the broadcast?
Okay.